We had to follow up Sicily with another Italian island to the west, which is only slightly smaller, at least in terms of area. So here are the stadiums and arenas of Sardinia, Italy. Stadio Vanana. Currently this stadium's capacity is being slightly reduced for safety reasons, which, to be honest, is basically par for the course when it comes to stadiums in the lower leagues of Italian football. Torres is in the third tier at the moment. It has also occasionally hosted the second biggest club in the city, a club that has an interesting name, Latte Dolce, or Sweet Milk. Whilst this stadium did open in 1922, there is literally just one small remnant of the original stadium remaining, a plaque, and perhaps whatever the plaque is mounted to. There's not even a track left, it's just dirt now, which isn't so pretty. Thankfully there were some new seats installed recently, and they really liven the place up. As the old saying goes, what a difference the installation of thousands of plastic seats makes. Paleto Del Sport. It might be small by world standards, but this is the biggest indoor arena on the island. When it first opened it was even smaller as there was no baseline seating. But a renovation in 2014 changed that, so now it has a slightly unconventional design that is reminiscent of some football stadiums, with its empty corners and cavernous stands at the ends. There are plans to expand the seating further. You might be wondering, where will the new seats go? Well, the corners will actually remain empty. Instead, they're going to be literally raising the roof to allow more fans inside, so they can in turn metaphorically raise the roof. That renovation will also modernize the facility as a whole. Even in its current state, it looks like a pretty decent arena. Unipol Domus. I don't parlo Italiano, but I think Unipol Domus means something like one city house place home thing. Something along those lines. Actually, let's look it up. Hey, Cortana. What does Unipol Domus mean?
I don't know. Why don't you just Google it?
Yeah, she said I was right. Anyway, it's home to the biggest football club on the island, Cagliari Calcio. Their current stadium doesn't really reflect that fact though, because whilst the grand buildings of Italy are generally speaking known for their ornate facades of stone, this club didn't want to go for that would have been too obvious. So instead they opted for a design that resembles a building site. Neo-scaffoldism they call it. No, the actual reason for the unconventional design is because it was in fact built as a temporary home for the club, as their previous stadium was in a state of disrepair. Speaking of which, it is always cool when we get to talk about an abandoned stadium, and that is the case at Stadio Santalia. It was the home of Cagliari, as I mentioned. They were here for nearly 50 years. In the latter years, most of the original structure was deemed unsafe for use, so the capacity was mostly coming from these temporary stands that were placed on top of the decommissioned running track. As of today, it has been partially demolished, and eventually a new permanent stadium will be built in its place. Speaking of former Cagliari home grounds, Stadio Amsicora is where they played before Santalia was built, although back in those days it had a capacity of around 34,000, and it had a football field rather than a hockey field that it has today. I probably didn't need to state the obvious there. You might be surprised to hear that field hockey is popular in Italy, and that's because it's not really. It's just that the club that plays here happens to be the most successful hockey club in the country, so that's why they can justify playing in a stadium like this that has a similar capacity to the top level hockey stadiums in countries that do like the sport, like the Netherlands. Paleto Del Sport. Quite a few arenas carry that same name, so I guess I should clarify that this one is on Sardinia. Well, actually there are several on Sardinia, so this one is the one in Cagliari. Well, there is actually another one in Cagliari. This is the one you're looking at right now. It's just a stone's throw from Stadio Santalia, and was actually built at around the same time. Whilst the concrete exterior had a bit going on, The interior is very rudimentary. Just one side has actual bucket seating, that being the one to the west. To paraphrase Jim Morrison of The Doors, the west is the best, because the west has backrests. It is comfortably the smallest venue we've seen so far, yet it's home to the most teams. It's a crowded Paleto. This is the other Paleto Del Sport, by the way. It doesn't meet the capacity cutoff. Jeez. That looks in worse shape than the abandoned stadium we saw earlier. It can be easy to overlook stadiums when you're trying to cover an entire island. And I did come close to missing Stadio Bruno N Poly, because the official capacity is below the cutoff. However, if safety restrictions weren't in place, it would be able to hold 8,000, so I'll include it. It may be small, but the town itself has only around 60,000 inhabitants. So considering that, it's a decent stadium, in a lovely location right by the long and narrow body of water. I don't know if it's a river or a canal, doesn't really matter. Oh, and by the way, Bruno N Poly, whom the ground is named after, was an Olbia goalkeeper who died after a collision on the field in 1960. Speaking of names, for some reason nearly all of the streets in this area are named after countries. The stadium is situated on Hungary Street, or Via Ungaria, but there's also Via Finlandia, Via Australia, Via Argentina, that street's a bit messy, Via Grecia, that's gotta be Greece, Danimarca, Norvegia, Ecuador, Turkey, Austria. I'm gonna have to interrupt myself there because that goes on for 7 minutes. So Bulgaria, Romania, Germania, how do I put myself on mute? Even Estonia has its own street in this town. Oh, it's not just countries, there are cities as well. Via Roma, Via Frosinone, Via... There we go. And those were the Stadiums of Sardinia. I was expecting to see more of a sardine influence, but I didn't see any fish at all. It's almost as if the name Sardinia has nothing to do with sardines. If you're new around here, please consider subscribing. If you already have subscribed, you're a bloody legend, mate, and clearly a wise individual. Thanks for watching, have a good one.